nonprofit and their website and get on their email list. DataWorks does a great job working with the Sheriff's Department and the Administrative Office of the Courts in tracking eviction filings. And so if you look at it, we've had many fewer eviction filings over the last 18 months than we would in a typical year. Some reasons for that are for example, some of the subsidized and public housing landlords that would often file a lot of cases have filed few or almost zero cases over the last 18 months. The Housing Authority, for example, has filed almost no eviction cases for the last 12 months. And even the private landlords, I would say the moratorium has been, as I said, 70 to 80% effective. So if you look at eviction filings this past year, they've been much lower. So that has allowed us at Legal Aid to focus on trying to help folks resolve the cases pre-filing, which is always our goal, because once an eviction is filed, that can go on someone's credit, and it can make it much harder for them to find the next safe, affordable home. If for those who are interested, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has put out some recent guidelines looking at how this eviction crisis is affecting credit reporting and looking at tenants as a consumer issue. And the National Consumer Law Center, NCLC, has put out an interesting analysis. It's basically looking at how when landlords look at applications, they look at credit reports or something similar to a credit report, and that a lot of the evictions that have been filed in spite of the moratorium, if they're reported on the credit report, it may actually be illegal. So just some other things to be aware of, and things that we may be able to help folks with going forward, a long-term impact of this. But let me, maybe the slide would help me be a little bit more focused. Let me get to the point. The moratorium is ending nationally at the end of this month. We've got a little bit of a grace period in Durham. So Judge Evans, who is the Chief District Court Judge for Durham, has entered an order that is continuing evictions filed for non-payment until September, essentially. So we get basically another month in Durham. Now, the CDC moratorium only applied to non-payment evictions, which is why I say it was about 70% effective. A lot of landlords have been filing cases for what's called holdover that we think are really about non-payment. So these are your private landlords. Holdover is not a cause of action that's available to a federally subsidized landlord anyway, but these private landlords are filing cases saying, I'm not trying to evict you because you owe rent, I'm trying to evict you because you're choosing not to renew your lease. And so we've seen a large increase in those. Many of those are in fact about non-payment of rent. So that's why we've seen, I say the moratorium has only been about, 70% effective, is because this is a way that landlords have gotten around it. As you may have heard, the governor's order, the statewide order was not renewed. The governor recommended that it be renewed, and the Council of State did not approve that. The main effect there, it really just strengthened the CDC moratorium. It put some burden onto the landlords to make sure that tenants were aware of their rights under the CDC moratorium, and to provide them with a declaration and provide the court with a copy of the declaration. But I don't expect that to have a large effect in terms of the number of filings. So that one was allowed to expire. The CDC moratorium is expiring at the end of this month. And then we've got another month essentially where the non-payment cases in Durham can be filed, but they won't be heard. So they'll just be continued out a month, which really means that what I'm expecting locally is that the wave of work on us at the Eviction Diversion Program, which is a partnership with Duke, is going to be broken up a little bit. It's going to start next month in August with the filings, and then it's going to really come in September. Now, unfortunately, August and September are always two of the highest months for eviction filings anyway, even if there isn't COVID. And that's, I think, for a lot of reasons. And I know that Lee is going to talk about ERAP, but I know they see higher applications for rental assistance in August and September, just like we see higher filings in August and September. It's because of back to school expenses, and it's because air conditioning bills are catching up with families at the end of the summer. So it's going to be kind of a double whammy. It's always kind of a big time of year, and now it's going to really hit us hard. I've started using the word flood instead of wave or tsunami, because unlike a wave or a tsunami that sort of hits you and then recedes, I expect that this is going to be a flood of work and filings that's going to be with us for a while. And I don't know how long it will be before the flood starts to recede. At least through the fall is my expectation. And I say that simply because the courts are limited in how many cases they can hear. So even if they all get filed September 1, it's going to take them a while to move through the court system. It's going to take them a while to move through the sheriff executing the writs. And not everybody's going to file day one. So I think that this is going to be sort of a flood that's going to be with us for a while, and we'll see how long it takes to abate. In some ways, that's good news, because it might mean more time for rental assistance or for tenants to move if necessary to make other arrangements. So we'll see what happens. I'll close with, I was on a call this morning with the other sort of leading legal aid housing attorneys from across the state, from Wilson and Greenville, and all, we serve all 100 counties, and I think we may be the only one of the few nonprofits that provides direct assistance to impoverished families that operates in all 100 counties in North Carolina. But we do, and we were talking this morning for a couple of hours about how are we going to prioritize which cases we can have the biggest impact and help. And because I know that a lot of you in your churches and your agencies are on the front lines when families are really struggling and are in crisis, the cases, and we did a whole separate, I think, presentation on this, but the cases where we can accept right now and make the biggest impact are cases that have already been filed in court, or cases where the tenant lives in subsidized or public housing, because there they have more rights before the filing happens, and we have some opportunity to try to resolve the issue, a better opportunity to try to resolve the issue before it even ends up in court. So subsidized housing cases, affordable housing, public housing cases that already are in court, or cases where there's really severe habitability issues. We want to continue to prioritize those, where it's really, cases where, and this is kind of a judgment call, but cases where there's a more minor habitability issue. At this point, I would encourage you to advise your parishioners or whoever you're working with to call the city inspector, try to resolve things with their landlord that way. We are not going to have the capacity right now to file some of the big habitability cases that we used to prioritize. We're going to have to kind of hold off on those for a little while. If it's a case where the family really has nowhere else to go and it's a health issue and it's an immediate crisis, we'll continue to prioritize those. But otherwise, we're going to have to kind of put those on the back burner until we have a little bit more capacity. So that's what we're looking at. We have a referral form that I'll send out that'll be with the presentation that I'll send to Spencer and share that talks about the sort of priority cases that we're looking to take and how you can refer folks to legal aid. And again, those cases go to legal aid and to Duke, because if somebody's not legal aid eligible, they may be served by the Duke Civil Justice Clinic. And let me just close with saying, I really don't know what's going to happen, right? So, the question we keep getting and get over and over again is how many families, how much money, how many filings, and we don't know, right? And I sort of gotten wary over the last 18 months of making predictions. The most recent numbers that I saw looked a little bit better, right? So the most recent survey that I saw was estimating that about 14% of households, rental households, are behind in rent. That's lower, significantly lower than the estimates that we were seeing 6 months ago or a year ago, where it was 25 to 30% of tenant households are behind in rent. So one thing is that's a national number. it might be worse in Durham, and I don't know if some of the other folks who are going to be sharing have reasons to think it could be worse in Durham or maybe better in Durham. If that's all it is in Durham, and I say all, 14% of rental households in Durham is, 8 to 10,000 families, right? It's a lot of people, and it's a big crisis. It's also not that far off a typical year in Durham. Frankly, 10% of households being behind in their rent is about par for the course. About 10% of households on average are filed against for an eviction in any typical year in Durham. We have, 10,000 eviction cases filed in Durham in a year. We have about 60,000 tenant households. So 14%, being behind in rent may not be that much worse than usual, frankly. We've got a much bigger problem. We've also got, as Lee will talk about, a lot more help. There's been a lot more help this year available than there usually is. So I am, hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. I think that we are, I would love to be wrong. You all have heard me, carrying my sign saying the end is nigh for 18 months, talking about, how bad this eviction crisis is going to be. And I think I stand by it. I think there's going to be a big flood of eviction filings when these moratoriums end. Even if it weren't for the pandemic, it's just if you sort of plug up the dam for 18 months and then you let it go, it's going to hit you hard, right? So even if it weren't for the pandemic, we know that there's going to be a flood of filings just because they've been held back, at least partially, for so long. On the other hand, there's been a lot more rental assistance. There's been a lot more attention to the issue. There's been a lot more advocacy around the issue. So I don't know. And like I said, this 14% estimate is, is half of the last estimate that I heard. And I'm not, so I'm going to continue to say, I think it's going to be bad and I'm trying to get prepared for it. And I really hope that I'm wrong, as I often am. So that's all I got.
Well, thank you, Peter. That's helpful update, and appreciate your take on what we're facing from where you sit. I think one of the things I've been considering the last night and this morning, as we invite Russ to share his perspective, is that I have been concerned about this eviction eviction flood, as you put it, Peter, looming. The way that we might in North Carolina, an approaching hurricane. And I think one of the things that I took away from Russ's presentation yesterday that he's going to reprise here is not just looking at this storm, but looking at the prospect of climate change in our community, to use an analogy, that is going to force us in faith communities and human services work across the community to think differently about this, about housing. This is the housing crisis we're facing, is not just the hurricane on our doorstep as these eviction moratoriums end, but is going to be compounded the way that we have begun to see real hurricanes by wider climate changes. So Russ, please go ahead and share some of what you were explaining yesterday to some of us.
Yeah, good to be with you today. And I'm going to share just a little background on the agency, since folks may not know, if that's okay, and that'll explain a little bit some of the perspective we're coming from. So we really concentrate on 5 areas in response to those who've been experiencing homelessness or seeking affordable housing. So first, we are designated by the city and county as the Unsheltered Coordinating Agency and Designated Street Outreach Agency. We completely relaunched that program about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and have worked with over 200 unsheltered individuals in this last 9 months or so, trying generally to connect them to housing, and if not, to shelter, and if they're not ready for that, the support they need to remain where they feel comfortable, with the hopes of one day connecting to housing. We also do a significant amount of work at times in partnership over this last year with CEF and 7 or 8 other local agencies around identifying landlords who would be willing to make units available to our various housing agencies. We work with, we are the primary rapid rehousing provider in the community. So folks who are, leaving unsheltered situations, leaving the shelters, more often than not are working with us to get connected to landlords, connected to housing. There's time limited rental support and supportive services for them. We'll work with over 100 households this year to make that connection. And that program has doubled in size in response to COVID and honestly in preparation for what we have anticipated is to come. We also operate a number of the supportive housing programs here for folks who've been long-term experiencing homelessness. We have 2 residential communities, which makes us in one hand the landlord, but also then working on the client support piece. And then we also offer another program where we work with private landlords for the same communities for long-term supportive services. And then finally, we operate 2 of our own affordable housing communities, including I'm required to call it the award-winning Holloway Place, which is the region's first attempt at affordable co-housing. Some of you may know Dove House, and it was once upon a time Dove House was completely regutted and reimagined, which is becoming a learning lab for us as a community around what shared housing might look like. So that all is to say, at times we are out trying to connect with landlords in order to get units. In times we are connecting clients to landlords, and at times we are the very landlord, depending on the particular program. So what we've been seeing this past year, even as we have expanded services, is, and this isn't a surprise, rapidly increasing costs for rental units. Last September, it came out that in a year, 1 bedroom unit costs had gone up in Durham by 34% to $1,333 a month, which is just unbearable and ahead, interestingly, well above what for our HUD funded programs were even able to pay based on their guidelines. They were, I think, very excited to offer us a 4% increase from year to year, and the reality was 34%. We then also had last year a 26% increase in the cost of 2 bedroom units, putting those on average over $1,500 a month. Again, ahead of FMR and what we're even able to connect people with. So, I mean, both of those situations put Durham in the top 3 cities in the nation for experiencing an increase. And one of the things we say is that, and let's not jump on like, oh, Google, oh, Apple, but I'm just going to say, all this is before Google and Apple announced that they were coming. So the pressure will only increase. And one of the things I've shared with folks, and they kind of laugh, and so my family goes way, way back in like Cary and Apex to like, the dirt road days where my father grew up. And I will tell you that none of us who have grown up in Cary thought a day would come where we would have staff who work in Durham saying, I'm going to have to live in Cary because Durham is so expensive. But a perfect example is one of our staff who was in a 3-bedroom apartment at $1,500 a month in Cary, within walking distance of the Whole Foods, tried to move with the same company, same exact plan and design to a property between Durham and Chapel Hill, and the same exact unit, same age, everything was $2,250 a month. That is just not, it's just not a world that many of us ever thought would come, but that is certainly the place that we're in. So you just imagine the downward pressure for those who have more limited resources to try and address. Another piece that we're seeing really consistently, I mean, we've been operating, rapid rehousing here for more than 14, 15 years at this point. We were one of the first 3 in the state to do it. What we are experiencing now that's interesting, both with that and with our supportive housing Streets to Home program, is we are having real estate agents call us when their clients are in the process of buying properties that we have long used as rentals to give us a heads up that the property's about to be bought and there's a likely transition ahead. That is not something that prior to this time that we've experienced. And so we are seeing that because the property values have gone up so much and people are able to essentially cash in on what is an investment, we're seeing much more of that activity. The other piece we continue to work with is this housing location, working directly with landlords to find more units. So last summer, we were one of 4 communities chosen by the North Carolina Coalition on Homelessness with funding from Blue Cross Blue Shield's Healthy Blue program, to have additional resources around landlord incentives and barrier busting. And we, in the midst of that period, you may remember Urban Ministries had to move to the Marriott. And then after about 3 months, they had to move out of the Marriott. So we were one of the primary partners helping move people from the Marriott to housing instead of going back to shelter or back possibly onto the street. So we partnered with 8 other agencies, and in about 100 days helped 100 individuals, including 49 total households, get into housing. If you see the city stats for last summer, it kind of goes like this for the whole year. It kind of goes like this, and then there's this blip in the summer when we had those resources. And interestingly, half of that money was used to pay past arrears. Because one of the things we do have is that the majority of folks who are willing to work with us tend to be private landlords. We have very, very, very few corporate owned properties that are willing or able to work with us. And so that's a fairly tight network to some extent. And so there's a lot of holding up. If there's past arrears, those need to be handled before folks can get in. So we had that money and we're able to do that. Because of Durham's performance, the community working together, we received another $225,000 for the same kind of project that we just launched a few weeks ago. And we got it up and running ahead of the moratorium with the idea that we may need some of those funds for folks who are coming out of eviction situations or have past arrears. We had, I will say we've had lots of congregations call us and say, do you need money to help folks who are about to be evicted? And I continue to say, call DSS, call legal aid. There are resources. What there aren't resources for is to help folks who are essentially carrying a stain on their credit from past evictions. That's one of the big pieces that we have tried to really work through. The last piece I think that we have been really recognizing is, while there are a lot of resources around evictions, one of the pieces that as a community we don't have a robust program focused on is prevention. And there's a very technical version of this. So, rapid rehousing is a good comparison. Folks are often coming out of shelter, coming out of unsheltered situations. We're able to negotiate with the landlord for a reasonable rate. We agree that using HUD funding and other funding, we're able to pay possibly all or at least a significant portion of the rent for an extended period. While folks get back up and running, they're connected to supportive services to be able to sustain that when they move off. What we lack in some cases is a comparable prevention program that can work with folks who have had, various forms of emergency assistance over time to help them get into rental units that are affordable. In some cases, folks are in places that are just simply not affordable. And until we can make that change, we're going to see that cycle continue of crisis after crisis. But right now, there's just not a real robust program in the community to help with that. Now, part of why we may not have that is that would require a lot more units to be available. And again, our biggest piece is there just simply aren't units. And I'll close by saying we have been working last summer and this year with coaches from Houston that work across the country. And when we have talked with them about the inventory issues we have for units, they have said pretty much from their expert opinion, there really aren't any other places like us at this point. I mean, there's just so little availability at any level in the various tiers of housing that we've got the systems kind of locked up. And I think one of the strange things, and bear with me as I say this because this makes me sound a little crazy or off, I guess. Part of the challenge has been with the eviction moratorium in place, the little bit of churn that might normally happen that Peter has described is not happening. And so a lot of landlords, their risk aversion has gone way up. And so folks who would have worked with us a year ago are like, I don't know what the future holds. I'm already, underwater with many of my properties. And so that's not to excuse anything. It's just to say that a side effect that we don't always, put in the equation is some of the churn that normally happens, and there are very bad things about that churn, but that it's not opening up new units for folks ready to take another chance and try and move forward with different support. So it's a very, again, we think we're crazy sometimes of what we're seeing, but we're seeing outside experts say, no, like we're really off the charts as the community on something that we really don't want to be off the charts on by any stretch.
Thank you, Russ. That's daunting. Uh, I think, and like you said, or we're told, that being in the unique situation that Durham is in, it is difficult to identify constructive paths forward to make an impact on that. I know we've been seeing strong efforts by our municipal governments for the last several years, and to utilize publicly owned properties for affordable housing development. And DCIA and Durham Can have been very encouraged to see the action is in that direction. But we've also heard and recognized that is, given what's happening in the wider real estate market, that is a little more than a drop in the bucket in terms of its impact on housing availability. Really, an important drop, a necessary foundation, especially with the redevelopment and expansion that Durham Housing Authority is doing with their properties, but still just the foundation. There's a lot more issues around availability for affordable housing that needs to be addressed, that how the municipal governments have some significant limitations on what they can do with the North Carolina legislature and North Carolina law being what it is,
Right.
restricting that. Lee, we're gonna step away from looking at the distress over the long-term situation that we're facing right now, and pull back to the short-term flood that is imminent, and how ERAP, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, has been launched to mitigate that and try to help folks out. Please unmute yourself and give us your briefing about where ERAP is at and what it's doing.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for actually having me so I can provide some information. I like to probably say I ditto all the comments that Peter has given and Russ has given on the economic crisis that we're in and the rental crisis that we're in. Just to give you some overview of some of the things that's happening in Durham County Social Services on more of a higher level, is that with the COVID, well, it began before the actual COVID crisis, but it was one of those silent things that was kind of brewing, and the COVID crisis just exacerbated all the things that we were failing in, and one was the rental and the housing situation with that we have in Durham County. During the COVID, we experienced a lot of evictions. We experienced a lot of uh, individuals that were renting their apartments, houses, that generally were renting above their income guidelines. So I think it's maybe 35-40% is somewhere where you want to be in terms of utilizing your income to pay for rent. It seems like from the applications and some of the statistics that we're seeing, it seems like more people were using more towards 60 to 70% of their actual income to pay for rent. What end up happening is that when the restaurants and those smaller jobs, part-time jobs that people were utilizing went away, that's when people began to suffer some real distress with being able to pay their rent. Since the pandemic, social services, which social services has been given out and running, I would say, 3 programs. We did the CDBG fund. We also did the NC Core HOPE program. and we also are currently doing an ERAP program. The CDBG fund that happened primarily in the beginning of the pandemic, we reached out and we were able to serve some in the neighborhood and close to about 1,200 families, which was a definite help to a lot of the families. This is again work that social services was doing above what they were currently their program functions were actually doing. So this was extra work, and I definitely like to give kudos for all of our staff that have been making it happen continuously during the pandemic. But the CDBG, we kind of reached out to about 1,200 families. Uh, Again, with the Hope and the NC Core, we began to, that fund came out with DSS back in October of 2000. We ran that program, or NC Core ran that program for about 30 to 40 days before they end up needing to shut that down because of the overwhelming support for financial assistance. We processed for Hope and NC Core, we processed about 18, close to 1,900 applications that received assistance in Durham County. Again, we see, and then we learned some things from NC Core and the Hope. We learned we learned that we were almost kind of kicking the can down the road in terms of people really needing assistance and what they actually need. Um, we needed to really kind of look in stabilizing people in their homes, and it was really there to provide assistance. And then what we also noticed is that that vulnerable population, we didn't reach out in the Hispanic population. We did not be able to reach out the way we really wanted to. So when we began to develop the ERAP program, we tried to reach out to some of those sections that we were unable to reach with Hope and tried to provide assistance with them. Part of that plan was to actually involve some of the nonprofits in the community. I can actually put those in, but we reached out. We had Center for Home Ownership and Economic Development, El Centro, Community Empowerment, Church World Service, and Healing with Care. The essence of incorporating those nonprofits was to give people another opportunity. Instead of coming to social services, they can also come to some community agencies that they feel a little bit more comfortable with and that can engage them a little bit better than social services. And we wanted to make sure we received another outlet for those families. For the ERAP program, we taken in close to we've taken in about 4,300 applications since we've been running. 2,900 of those applications are still being what we develop a software. We just didn't think that, which we couldn't, we didn't think that we could manage that kind of workload with doing some of the services that we're already continuously doing. So those services, our regular services, didn't stop, and we just wanted to see if we can find another alternative way to help and support the community, other than seeing them face to face and completing applications, because we didn't have the manpower to do so. We end up hiring about 25 temp staff, and this is with the support of our director and our board to really kind of support the work that we did. About 4,300 ERAP applications. We have a significant amount of ERAP applications in progress. And when I mean in progress, those are 2,900 of either landlords completing their section or tenants completing their section completely. And I like to emphasize the word completely. Then we have about 11 to 1,200 applications that actually have checked all the boxes far as we know, and has moved to the review process and the checks and balances with our social worker or supervisor. We are going through those applications quickly as possible, so that we can process those and send those all over to our business office. Just some statistics, a little bit about what kind of demographics are we looking at. So basically, so far, what we're seeing is about 55% of the applications we're getting, anywhere from 50 to 55% are families or households with 30% uh, income AMI and below. Then we have about 30% above the 30%, 30 to 50% AMI. And then we have the 15% right now, above 15% to 80% AMI. The cutoff is 80% AMI, right, where you will not be eligible for the assistance. Wanted to see if anyone had any questions that I can help. I think I see something in the chat. How
Yeah.
many of the 43?
Yeah.
How many of the 4,300 have been approved? So social workers are not able to actually see the applications until until they actually get a review into the review state. So we're looking at 1,200 currently at the review state where social workers can actually see. I would probably say our approval rate for that group would be somewhere in the neighborhood of close to about 95%, because some of the things that we put in place to help the most vulnerable, those things are helping in terms of approving cases. So unless there's not a COVID related incident, or COVID related incident, and you're not over the income guidelines, you should be able to get approved. There's some other qualifications, but that is the usually main one for denial. I'm just trying to go through the chat.
Yes,
Let me-
Lee, one question, I think for a lot of our non-housing professionals working on this, something that's helpful, I find, when we talk about these programs is putting some numbers, some dollar amounts to what AMI is. So do you happen to have at hand what the what 50 or 30% of AMI for Durham is in terms of dollar amounts for 1 and 2 person households?
Yeah, I can actually get you to the chart and actually put it in the chat box or give it to you. And
That
you
sounds
can
that sounds great.
I can definitely do that.
Because I think it's good for people to see, to get a sense of what the dollar amount is. I know what 30% of AMI for Durham for a single person household, I think is like what, around $1,200 a month income, something like that.
Yeah, I don't want to say without looking
Yeah.
at it, and I will see if I can pull it up quickly for you.
And just as a rule of thumb, the 50% for an individual is right around 32,000.
A year.
And for a family of 4s, around I don't have it exactly right, but 43 to 45, right in that range. It would be 50% of AMI.
Okay, so there's there's a lot of Durhamites that could be eligible for this, and could benefit from this.
Could I ask just quickly, Lee, maybe I missed it. You said 4,300 applications, 2,900 are pending, as in they're not complete yet, either by the tenant or the landlord, and 11 to 1,200 have moved to the social worker review stage. Are there any out of that 11 or 1,200 that have actually moved to finance where you're cutting the check, or are they all still at the social worker review stage? I didn't get that last number if you gave it in terms of
Okay.
fully approved.
Yeah, I didn't.
Gonna cut
I
the
don't
check.
know if I gave that last number, but out of the 1,100, we have moved about 420 cases to the business office. We actually are doing some ACH payments, some electronic payments, so that they will get the money faster. So we try to incorporate that with the software program and just physical checks. But we gave as many landlords the options. We did meet with the landlord, with a lot of landlords prior to open up the program to see if an ACH payment, electronic payment, would be better this year than. So we end up doing that portion for our landlords, so they can get the funds quicker.
And what is the time from when somebody completes the application? How long does the social work review take and the business office? I mean, I know your goal was really admirable. You were trying to do it within 10 days, which was awesome. And I can see where that would be a very difficult or aspirational goal to make, but how are we doing? I mean, of these 400 that have moved to the business office, what is the realistic turnaround at this point from complete application to wire transfer?
So just so you would understand the process, usually if everything checks and balances that we're requesting or the federal government have requested that we make sure happens by the tenant and the landlord, and we did do a landlord tenant agreement trying to help ensure that the tenant would not, I guess we wouldn't pay the bill and then the tenant would be evicted anyway. So we tried to put in place like a landlord tenant agreement. If everything is completed, it usually is our estimated time for a social worker to complete a application is anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes. From that process, it will get sent to the supervisor just to verify that the social worker did what they needed to, and all the money and the balances are correct. It then gets electronically sent to the business office, which is a lot different from our previous programs where a lot of stuff was paper and it was actually signed off. But this is electronic to the business office, and the business office is turning those around. I believe I would like to say about 7 days, 5 to 7 days.
So it sounds like a lot of the potential and actual delays in the process for getting the funds paid can happen in getting the landlord agreements done.
I would probably say our latest hiccup, I mean, we've had some hiccups all along the way, but our latest hiccup is making sure we get complete applications. By completed applications, it takes double amount of time, and I can't even give an estimate, but it takes double amount of time once something is missing or a tenant has completed half the applications and they either didn't check something or they didn't complete something. So the social worker then has to reach out to complete the application. They then have to reach out to them and either use the phone that they provided or email if they didn't. And sometimes we get a disconnection. So, it gets tough in that way. That's our main thing is we don't get enough. We don't get a huge amount of completed applications where they need the entire thing.
Thanks. That is a frequent challenge with these kinds of funding programs. Donna Carrington is with the Community Empowerment Fund that has been one of the assistant organizations, partner organizations on the ground, helping people get those applications completed accurately and fully as best as they can to prevent those delays. And Donna, I know that one of the challenges in Durham has been getting people connected with these resources, getting the word out about it, getting the information out, and getting them, getting them into the application process online, for which, the partnership of CEF and El Centro and CARE and other partners has been a strategy to try to reduce that or improve the community access. What's been your experience at CEF with getting people connected with these funds and getting the applications underway?
So it's been a lot for us. I think we also didn't understand in the beginning how many people would really need and want to do this. And so that has been some of the initial issues for us. And I think some of what I'm hearing from staff is because some of the processes change, some of the forms change. When a person is first doing the application, they may think it's completed, and then there's another form, or there's another something that they need. And so engaging back with them to get that form or thing that they need, since we're the one helping them process it, has been a problem. A lot of times our members are talking about waiting on the landlord to finish their piece, if the landlord finishes it at all. We are seeing some refusal of landlords to take it, which I think we didn't anticipate on this side at all. Because of what had happened with NC Hope, we thought things would be addressed so they would take it. But apparently there are some that still won't. And so that's been another place that's been kind of hard. But yeah, I think the recent thing we're seeing is people think it's completed and then there's another form. And so they have to go back in and do this other form or upload some other thing. And it sometimes feels like the process just keeps going. And it's harder because a lot of times the way we have set it up is these aren't members that we're engaging with all of the time. These are people that are just calling our line and are asking for the support to help. So reaching back out to get them back to do a thing can be harder.
I got bumped off.
You got bumped off?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. You on video?
Thank you, Donna. I know that
Mhm.
we appreciate the work you've been doing on that. I know here near the DCIA office, we've been seeing the Church World Service folks out in the parking lot to meet with applicants on a daily basis each week for the last couple months. And I think it's still a challenge to get people connected, even with not just with the ERAP program, but with the support that you and others are offering to get people through the ERAP process, which is one reason why I think it's going to be important for faith communities to help bridge that gap and get the information when they're approached about assistance about the information out about ERAP, about CEF and Church World Service and CARE and El Centro, the others that are there to assist with getting through the application process and trying to avoid some of those roadblocks that Lee and you've described people are at risk of running into. I want to invite others to, if you've got particular questions you would like to raise for Lee or Russ or Peter or Donna about evictions and the emergency rental assistance program in Durham, please do that. We've got a few minutes still that I want to invite people to ask their questions. You're welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question and then remute yourself. Jim. Okay, maybe Jim just accidentally unmuted himself. Let's see here. We did have a question from a couple of people in the chat in terms of are there options when a landlord refuses to accept ERAP, or is that simply an insurmountable obstacle to getting this to getting the transaction resolved? Lee, do you have a response for that?
Yes, so we don't want to just leave it up to it. So our social workers, again, if we get a landlord that don't want to participate, they try to reach out to them and at least explain the process, explain to see if they are more comfortable, maybe speaking with someone from social services in terms of it. And then we have not incorporated our second, which is a second phase of actually trying to provide the assistance directly to the applicant. At this time, we just don't have the manpower to give the assistance directly to the actual applicant, which it is part of the federal guidelines, but they do want you to ensure that that rent or that check amount goes directly towards the bill. And if you can just see some of the issues that would present if you directly get someone a check with in their name. And you would have to kind of make sure that the landlord actually gets it. So we have not been able to put that process in because that will take a lot of manpower and probably some safety issues too for the social worker.
Mm-hmm. Also, Julia Jensen put in a note about what Jewish Family Services at Jewish for Good have been doing. And I should also mention that the Salvation Army has been and will be doing some significant rental assistance as well with EFSP funds, Emergency Food and Shelter Program funds that we collaborate with them about. So Salvation Army, Jewish Family Services are also a couple of other resources that faith communities should be aware of for folks that they encounter. Other questions? Yes, Ajax?
Thank you, Reverend Bradford. I was just curious if this group had a general consensus about who from the city or the county ought to be responsible for providing a public dashboard so that we can see how these funds are being expended over time and make decisions about how to organize in relationship to the pace and the upcoming funding deadlines that come through treasury for additional funds that are supposed to be coming our way. So would that be community development's responsibility, or would that be DCO's responsibility, or who might be able to provide us with some transparency? I heard Mr. Little speak upon about 10%. Sounds like about 10% of the applications have been funded. That's I'm guessing that's a fraction of the money that's in the bank.
Yeah, I would expect that would probably, given that the county, there'd probably be folks at the county that we would want to talk to about that. Maybe I'm certain that Ben Rose, the director of social services, would be probably the place to begin discussing that, and then with our county commissioners and the county manager's staff about that, perhaps. I appreciate your point about that. I know that the city has just set up a website attempting to do some of what you're describing with regard to the housing bond funds that were authorized a couple of years ago, and that is still the website is up. The data is not all on there yet, but it's a step in that direction that I hope is going to become more utilized in the coming weeks. But yeah, something similar for ERAP would be a dashboard to see where things are at, could be very, very helpful. I suspect that with Lee's Department of Social Services, it sounds like they're pretty well consumed with the operational aspects of moving the money through, and the reporting and technical aspects probably would have to originate at another desk. Is that correct, Lee?
Yes, that is. We do reporting each and every month, and I guess that information is always available at the county commissioners meeting, those kind of forums. But the information and the transparency of the report, they send out a weekly report, or I send it to them where where it may actually end up. But I know it goes to the federal government, and we give out information to the city and budget and finance.
Great. So the data is there. It's just a question
Yes.
of
Who has the data and where do you get it?
and making a priority of making that accessible. Thank you. That's a good point. Ajax, it sounds like something that could be useful for following up with the county manager and the DSS director, Ben Rose. Thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yes, my name is Debbie Worcester. I'm a community health worker with Duke Population Health Management Office, lifetime resident of Durham, born and raised. And my concern is the housing situation. We know, even I've gone to numerous Zooms, it's not going to get any better here in Durham County. But speaking to all the panelists and to those in attendance here, what can we do? What is the goal? Where are we headed on trying to, help the situation that we're currently in? We know Google and Apple are coming, and we're already in a crisis. And that's my question.
All right, so that's the $42,000 plus question is what's the solution, folks?
Well, I will share and put a plug in, considering the audience, that we're partially going to have to build our way out of this. And I will say a number of us have been in conversation. There's a group convened by Duke's Office of Durham and Regional Affairs. And I know a group of us have been looking at just, first of all, accessing land. Sometimes it's not terribly hard to find funding to build housing. The issue is accessing land. And there are three groups that have a fair bit of land: Duke, the city, county, and state, And then listen close and for the third one, the churches. There is a lot of land in Durham that is underutilized at churches. And I should disclose, I am United Methodist clergy. I understand this. I've been a conference trustee. I have worked at our General Board of Global Ministries as an executive with churches that were working on these very issues. One of the things we're trying to figure out is how to have a really good conversation, the city and others, about the space at congregations, because so many have land that's underutilized, was planned for future growth, that that maybe the church's life went a different way. There's parking there that 2 cars use it out of 50 spots. And again, I've served in those situations, I understand it. But one of our biggest needs is for congregations, and you can contact me and I'll put you in contact with a number of agencies. We're really trying to find a way to have constructive conversations with faith communities about how to partner, because there's some really creative stuff happening across the country that really could be happening here too. And a lot of it relies on congregations thinking differently and creatively about how to utilize their land. So that is one option. So hope that's not too much, Spencer, but
Russ,
that's always in my heart and head.
Russ, you are singing my tune. Thank you. I appreciate you doing that. As people of faith look at how to respond to this, certainly we need to be communicating our concerns and priorities to our elected officials for public policy purposes. But I am also reminded of the disciples of Jesus when they saw the crowd of 5,000 around them hungry, and asked Jesus, what are we going to do with all these hungry people? And Jesus' response to them was, what do you have? And even though it seemed like a few loaves and fishes, that's what they started with. And I think that's the question that more of us in faith communities need to come back to, as at least part of the solution, is answering that question: what do you have? What is in our hands that could be used to bring to bear to create more affordable housing? And land is an indispensable piece of that. So thanks for raising that, Russ. I want to thank Lee and Donna and Russ and Peter for speaking with us today, for sharing their thoughts and information. And I hope that the contact information that has been shared about the ERAP program and other resources in the community will be of use to our congregations in the coming weeks and months to try to help our neighbors in crisis and try to mitigate this the needs for rent and housing in our community in the coming weeks. We'll continue to post updates about this in our news emails as in the coming weeks, and encourage you to contact Lee and Donna about the ERAP program, as well as there are other partner organizations. If you have questions specifically about connecting individuals with those resources. And certainly folks who are facing eviction should be in contact with legal aid about their diversion program to try to find alternative solutions to so they can stay housed. Thank you all for coming online with us today. I hope you have a great rest of the week. And DCIA will be hosting next month Superintendent Mubanga of Durham Public Schools to talk about the Durham Public Schools learning plan for the academic year, an update on their strategic plan in the wake of COVID, and the ways that faith communities can connect and support their nutrition work for students in Durham Public Schools. I hope to see you all back here, and invite you to bring your friends and leaders from your congregations next month and for our Durham Public Schools Forum on August the 17th, same time, 12 noon. Take care. Thanks again.